What's brought you back to Newcastle in the first place?
Well, Adam, thanks for having me. It's great. Weather's sensational here at the moment. But no, I'm back in Newcastle for. I'm currently working at Ice Hockey Australia.
So let's go back a bit. How the hell did you get to Ice Hockey Australia? You're a rugby league player.
Yep.
Grew up in Taree, Singleton, and now you're somehow Ice Hockey Australia. How did that all come about?
Did not know a thing about ice hockey until I moved to Newcastle as an 18, 19-year-old. And that was when the North Stars were just coming into existence. Had no idea. Fast forward 23 years. And it's been a bit of a journey. From a professional rugby league playing career. Working in the coal mines, just up the road here at Bulga, to working in Olympic, Paralympic, Olympic systems. And it sort of come my way in the last 4 months. This GM role popped up, and it was something that I had been working towards, and landed it, and have a crack.
So like when you play rugby league, you work in a coal mine, and then you're like, I'm going to have a crack at this sport administration. How did, was it just like that's a passion of yours? You love sport, and you just want to get involved even more, and then. Yeah, was it so the North Stars basically?
It's random. It's random.
So the North Stars, if anything, the North Stars helped you have that inkling of ice hockey, and it's got you to where you are.
Absolutely. So when I was living here in Newcastle and playing junior reps for the Knights, and then eventually first grade, I'd love reading the Herald. See if my name was in there. Like what you are when you're a kid. And then always in the back of the paper in the Herald, there was always stuff about the North Stars. Always, and how successful they were, and I like success and I like high performance. Absolutely, the North Stars had a bit of a guiding sort of light for me to get into the industry.
What was it like your first North Stars game that you went and attended? Did you go and watch many games?
Early days, yeah. Probably not too dissimilar to now. Where it's a packed house. They generally win. So it's they've got a passionate supporter base here, and they're successful. And Gary Doré down there at the ice house or the ice rink has a wonderful crew and really good ice, and has got a loyal, passionate supporter base.
Righto. Let's go back to where it all started. So, born in Taree. How did it all? So you were born in Taree, and then you went to Singleton.
Yeah. So born and bred in Taree, 82 model. But my father was a policeman. Yeah. So that sort of meant that he tripped around a little bit, and predominantly in the Hunter Valley, Manning River area. And so we went to Cessnock very, very quickly, and then up to Singleton. And I went to primary school up in Singo, which was fantastic. It was really cool. And that's where I really learned how to play football. My first coach was a fellow by the name of Neil Stocks. And he's a stock and station agent still now to this day. But
he's
Stocksy,
got the last name for it, doesn't he?
He's Stocks, yeah. And I played with his son Kurt, and he just taught me the basics, how to work hard, even at under sevens, the real basics: catch, pass, tackle, how to play as a team, and we were really successful. Crazy to think like you can think back like there to those grounding sort of. Times in your career, but Neil, he was like a stickler for doing the things right, the small things right. Went to Singo primary, and then Dad got a job back up at Taree and to take over the detectives up there. So we packed up and went back up there for year 7, high school, Taree, and it was awesome. Like really. When I was there, and particularly towards the later years of living in Taree, all I wanted to do was get out of there and get to Newcastle, and all my school friends were the same, get to Sydney or to Melbourne or Gold Coast or Brisbane, generally get away from being in Taree. And I think back now and I think I'd love to live in that part of the world. Like it's such a
beautiful spot, isn't it?
It's a great way to grow up in the lifestyle. So I went to Taree to high school up in Taree, and yeah, it's fantastic. Made my way down to Newcastle.
You were talking about like the playing junior rugby league and coming through. Is it like some of those even I'm no great footballer. I'm nowhere near what you achieved. But like growing up, I played football, and those sides that you play at a younger age, they still stick in your mind, and you make lifelong friends there, don't you?
It's so important, and to create those opportunities. I was one of those kids that, just played league in the winter and cricket in the summer. But there's so many more opportunities out there for kids now that I believe there are, which is fantastic. But you can really set up some really good lifelong lessons and for later on in life. Like, sport plays such an important part for me and for my family. And I think generally it can as well. Look, at the end of the day, not everyone wants to play sport, and that's completely fine. There's the arts and drama and music and all these other sort of wonderful sort of industries. But, for me, sports, particularly team sports, it's just a wonderful upbringing.
Growing up in Taree, I imagine it would be just like me when I grew up in Gilgandra. Sport is life, like for most people.
Well, unfortunately, and probably from mum and dad at the time, I really, wanted to stay at high school for sport, for rugby league. And my goal was to make the Australian schoolboys. So put everything on hold. I actually stayed in Taree for year 11 and 12 rather than coming down and going to school here in Newcastle. Because I thought I had a better chance to, have a stable home environment and, enjoy those last couple of years at high school. But the only reason I stayed at high school was to try and make the Australian schoolboys, which thankfully I did.
Yeah, what was that moment like? You're a boy from Taree and you've fulfilled your dream of playing in the schoolboys. What was that moment like when you get selected?
A little bit of relief, because if I go back a couple of years, I was in year 10 and I didn't make the New South Wales CHS team down at Toronto as a 15-year-old, and I was gutted. Like, I was really, really disappointed. All my mates, my friend, Kurt, whose father was Neil Stocks, we'd gone our separate ways, and Kurt made it. And I didn't, and he was one of my best friends. And I was like, okay, well, where's my career going here? All at 15.
Yeah.
Which is so silly to think. But a lot of pressure you can put on yourself. But the reality is you can be good at 15 and potentially not go ahead in your career, in your chosen career. So for me, then fast forward 2 years, and then to make the schoolboys was a little bit of a relief, because that next 2 years, all my energy was into trying to improve and play good footy. So it was a nice moment.
Just like growing up in Taree and Singleton and stuff like that, was there ever a time where you took on maybe your city brothers and just think to yourself, let's go for them? Like, just because I know, like, when I was growing up, you just feel envy because you're like, well, they've got everything. Yeah. We need to show them what we can do. Was there ever a moment, like, growing up where you're like, or even probably schoolboys, where you're playing against some people who are going to these big schools in Sydney? I
remember playing, so in Taree, we're Group 3. Yeah. And so Port Macquarie, Foster, Gloucester, Taree, Wingham. And that was Group 3. And we'd play in the country championships against Newcastle. And that was playing the big boys. Yeah. And we were humbled every single year. It was a big reality check. The opportunities that you've got in Newcastle and the bigger pool participation base. So always, like, that's probably why I stayed in Taree, is to try and prove that you can, like, make it from outside, the big cities. And Newcastle's not big, is it?
Yeah.
But for me, in being in the country, and for you, where Gilgandra, like, it's Newcastle's the big smoke, and it was really, really humbling every time we played against the Newcastle rep team, how good they actually were.
But how good was it for you to know that they want you to come to Newcastle and be a Knights junior? When did that moment happen, when obviously the Knights are like, we want you to be part of our club?
It would have been 97. We'd been doing some summer development camps down at Ford Oval, and they again were really humbling, coming down, and all the 15-year-old boys that live in Newcastle knew all the moves, knew all the coaching staff and the strength and conditioning staff. And I'd come down and really, again, questioning whether, I could actually make this as a career or sort of progress. All at 15, you think you can make a career of it. But did a couple of summer camps, and then actually did a trial out here at Toronto again. And given that I actually didn't play very well in the CHS 15s tournament, I was really, really nervous. I remember going back and playing in these trial matches, but thankfully got a letter in the mail from Warren Smiles, who is the former CEO and footy manager of the Knights, and that was a welcome relief, to get that little emblem on the envelope. in the mail.
Yeah.
Like, think back now. Wonder how long it took to get up to Taree.
And
Probably
you don't
took
wanna
a
get
week.
lost.
You don't want to get lost. And so it was a nice little moment to open up that letter and see the congratulations.
And I imagine that getting that letter is also the relief of knowing, like, I'm a boy from Taree and I can match it with these other boys that are Newcastle or Big Smoke. You're matching with them. There's like, you look at kids now who might be in the same situation as you. They might be in Taree and they're like, I want to take it on, but I'm just nervous that I can't beat them.
Oh, it's a big commitment. And like Taree's only 2 hours north, so it's not too far away, but it's still a big commitment to, you know, you do feel a world away compared to being down here in Newcastle. And there's all those outer regions, Tamworth, Armidale, Moree. Like, there's a huge catchment area out there, rugby league players that, you know, may think that they're good enough, can't get here, don't think they're good enough and make it. Like, there's a whole range of different circumstances. But yeah, I just think, going back to that letter, I think it's so important for organisations, coaches and administrators to really understand the power of that connection piece. And that letter, that congratulations letter, is so important, you know, for lifelong sort of connection to the sport or to an administrator or a person involved in the club. And yeah, just seeing that written down on paper is pretty cool.
Have you still got that letter?
Oh, I think Dad's probably got it somewhere. Yeah, Dad's a bit of a hoarder. When I finished playing football, he gave me 9 years worth of big leagues, and he goes, "Here you go, mate. Well, you can that might be worth a little bit of money back in the future, or probably won't be, but yeah, Dad's got all the stuff."
Just to know that, or your dad's so proud for you to do stuff like that. Like, he's watched his son go and play in the big leagues. That's. How much commitment did your family put in to help you get to where you are today?
Oh, look, it was equal share. So, Mum and Dad were a huge supporter of me. They, drove me down from Taree to Newcastle 3-4 times a week. I got my P's in year 12 in May, and then I was like, "Here you go, mate, you're driving." So, there was that little bit of separation piece, and I guess it was nice. I knew that I had the support. But if you want to do it, you've also got to want to do it and do it yourself as well. But Mum was always in the kitchen with dinner when I got home at 10:30 at night from driving to the back end of 99. I was in Jersey Flegg, so I was trying to do HSC and Mum was always there cooking dinner. So, very, very good supporter base. They come over to the schoolboys later that year, 6 weeks in England, Ireland and France. So it was pretty good. They tripped around.
Yeah, what was that like, playing schoolboys and touring around at what, were you 18 at that
17.
time? 17 at that time, touring the world playing football.
When you're 17, you think you're King Dingling, don't you? And you get put into that sort of team, and it's a very historical sort of part of rugby league is the Australian schoolboys. And when they started, I think the first one was 74, and very, very successful component of rugby league and schoolboy rugby league. Lots of famous, well-regarded rugby league players have gone through that system. So to go through that, and we were the first ones to travel for 4 years. The team before that was 95 with Owen Craigie, Bedsy, and a whole heap of other guys. They went to England as well. So for us to go 4 years later was like pretty cool. And it turned out to be, the connections that we made. We had a pretty shit hot team, to be fair.
Who was in that team?
So it was Hodges at fullback. There was Gaznia in the centres, Mark Gaznia, Jamie Lyon in the centres, Michael Luck, Anthony Quinn, Shane Tronk in the front row, Corey Parker. Brent Tate was on the bench and didn't play any tests. So, look, it's a pretty handy team.
That's a crazy team.
Pretty, and I'm sure I'm missing maybe one or two there. Braithen Astor was lock. Wow. So, yeah, it was a pretty handy team. That
must be pretty cool to know though that you were in that team as well. Like you're rubbing shoulders with all these other players as well.
At that time, but we were like enemies. New South Wales versus Queensland, and played in the 17s competitions, which they still run now, and the schoolboys, and then so your enemies on the field, and then to go away on schoolboys, and then come together on a 6 weeks tour. I know a lot of those guys, and they ended up touring together in senior Australian teams, which is amazing in itself, for them to do that. But at that time, we were just friends, just 17-year-old buddies getting to know each other.
Oh, look, I heard one name, Jamie Lyon. He's from Weewar. Like, he's even further west and more remote than Taree. I can imagine for someone like him as well, he's followed a similar journey to most country people where you're out in the bush and next thing you know, he's over in England. It must have been a bit of a strange feeling for him, I would imagine.
Oh, I would imagine so, yeah. And I know that, later on, a number of years down the track, he spent some time away from the game to go back out that way and just reconnect with the bush. So, yeah, I don't, I've certainly got some sympathy and empathy for people that come in from the bush.
Yeah. Now, when you come to Newcastle, what was that like moving to the big smoke, Newcastle at that time?
So, former junior development manager Warren Smiles, who, like I said before, become the footy manager and the CEO, he hooked us up with a family down here, and I was up at Adamstown Heights, and Sid and Dot McMurray. Now, if it wasn't for Sid and Dot McMurray coming down from Taree and living with them for 9 months, it could have been, who knows, like the story could have been a lot different. I was the first time player to go into their house, and they opened up the doors, and they were in their 70s at that stage, and they were just wonderful. Fantastic people, cooked for me, made sure that everything was prepared, and really took me under their wing. Subsequently, like in 2000, when I moved down here, Mum passed away, so they were just like phenomenal, like for them to be there for me. And again, I really like the idea if kids are moving down from the country if they can get a pretty good environment to transition into, it's really important to have that occur.
That must have helped so much, just to know that you've got a stable home when you're in a place where you might not know too many people when you come down to Newcastle.
Oh, money was tight too.
Yeah,
it was big.
What
big,
was that like?
Big time. I did some stuff with it was like a reject shop.
Yeah.
Did some couriering. Sid McMurray, he's passed on now, but he hooked me up with a nursery.
Yeah, right.
I was like 18-year-old working in a greenhouse trying to get all the mould and stuff off the tarp on the ground. I was like, this is not me. Worked in a surf shop, Old Wild Surf Co. Up at Katara here. I did some jobs. But to have that stable environment to go home and know that there was food on the table, it was pretty handy.
When you come down and you're doing all these things, was that what everyone else was kind of doing as well?
Know.
Like,
I got no idea.
Do you think that helped though? Like,
Yeah.
like when you first start and you're developing a work ethic, aren't you?
You've got to find your feet. And I remember going to, it was like a 7-Eleven or something across the road from Adamstown Bowling Club. Yep. It was a servo there, and I had my car and I filled it up with $10 worth of petrol, and I went in with $10 worth of 20-cent coins to fill it up, and the old mate behind the counter was like, I can't accept this. I was like, oh mate, this is all I've got.
Wow.
And that was just, it's humbling, really. Like, you got to work hard and get the money and don't overspend, and you get that work ethic. Yep.
Wow. So how long were you doing that until you realised, okay, I've got a stable base and I don't have to be cleaning mould of nurseries and...
No, literally. So I was working up at Wild Surf Co., ended up being out the back in the factory, putting tags on clothes. The boys still love talking about the fact that I was just putting clothes on hangers. And look, it's a role, It's if you don't have people out the back doing the stuff in the warehouse, you don't get the clothes on the shop front. And I was training, reserve grade, training with first grade, and I was still working. That was 2002. And then Hagues gave me a call up, Michael Hagan, and I was like, I went into work and said, I've just been called up to play first grade and I won't be back. So I took a punt. And thankfully it paid off.
I can imagine you get that first grade call up and you're like, well, I'm going to make sure I do this well so I don't have to come back here.
Don't have to go back and do that because, how fortunate to be an athlete and to get paid to train and play footy on the weekend with what you love. So why give that up easy?
Yeah. Now, let's talk about that first grade debut. Can you tell us about it? What was that? What was the week leading up like? You obviously got the call.
Yeah.
What was the week leading up like? And What was the actual game day like?
So it was 2002. I was 19-year-old kid, and like I said, I'd been working in the factory, the warehouse out the back of Wild Surf Co. Got the call up, and it was Origin time. So we had Joey out, Bedsy, I think BK. So all these guys, legends of the game. Probably Gids and Tamana Tahu might have been out as well, and we were playing New Zealand Warriors. So they were largely, Pacifica, New Zealand. So they didn't contribute to the
Big boppers too.
big boys, and didn't contribute to State of Origin for players. So they were nearly full strength, and was over here at Marathon, or I think it was at the time maybe Energy Australia. I think it might have been Marathon, and it was a daunting week. So in their pack, they had Jerry CU, Monty Beetham, Arwen Guttenbill, Mark Tukey, like Warangi Kupu, Ali Lawatiti. Like these guys are
Sounds like you lost sleep during that week. You know all their names. You remember them all.
proper tough guys. They ended up making the GF that year. They were proper good. Yeah. And so fresh face, 19-year-old coming in to play Jerry CU, and he was a tough man, and he was grunting and snorting in the scrums and really trying to intimidate me. And it was pretty humbling actually.
And I assume you had a fair contingent from Taree came down and watched.
Well, there was a number of my mates had come down, and Dad had come down. Mum had passed, but very, very some sort of divine intervention. It was Mum's birthday that I debuted on, so That was pretty cool. And to be honest, I don't really remember too much about what it was like after. It was just a dead set blur. Yeah. So, but after that, onwards and upwards, I guess.
Yeah. And then knowing that you got your first crack. How long so you played a few games after that? Like you kept it going, kept it rolling.
Yeah. So I ended up playing 15 games that year. So that was halfway through that I made my debut, and I pretty much played the rest of the year, first grade, and was fortunate to go back to reserve grade for nearly my whole career at the Knights, at least anyway.
That's awesome. And you talked about how like the stars left to play Origin. Bedsy was one of them, another Taree boy.
Yeah.
Did you run into Bedsy while you were up in Taree, like when you were growing up, or was he just a bit old? Too much older?
Yeah, he was a little bit older than me, but he actually was one of those guys that moved down and went to Francis Xavier, and that the option was there for me when I was at school, so I didn't really have much of a touch point to him. Which is fine, but definitely knew about him. Like that was, growing up, it was always this guy, Danny Badiris, and then the opportunity to play with him one day was just phenomenal.
That must be pretty cool when you see someone from Taree as well who's proven you can do it, and then you're following his footsteps, and then you get to play alongside him. That must have been like, it must be a moment where you're like, Taree, you're proud, like you're proud Taree boys.
So Taree, I'm so proud of being Taree. Like it's I don't get up there very often, but there's some tremendous people that come out of there, and tremendous rugby league people. Matt and Phil Adamson, Jared Mullen, he was there up at Taree, Bedsy, Michael Erickson played on the wing for the Eels, Mal Cochran played in Sydney, and then in later times you got Latrell Mitchell, of course, and Boyd Cordner. So like it's a pretty happy hunting ground for rugby league up there. So anytime that those guys I don't necessarily go for South, but I do because Latrell Mitchell comes out of there and he's a freak.
Just seeing what Latrell does, and he's proud of where he comes from, and he's more than happy to just go, well, I'm going back to Taree. And he's openly said that he'd love to move back there after he retires. He must be just a god up in Taree at the moment for the next generation.
Yeah, and not just Indigenous First Nations kids up there either. Like he'd be a god up there for all rugby league players from under 7s all the way through to under 18s before they go to seniors. Like he's a freak, and it's so good to see that he's proud of the region. Now
you had your stint with the Knights and went to the Penrith Panthers. What was that like going from, you got your junior club, you've been with them basically your whole career, you probably think to yourself, I'm going to be here for life, and then Penrith Panthers. What's that like moving to a whole nother club and moving to the big smoke now. You're going to Sydney.
Look, it was probably the worst thing that I thought was ever I didn't want to do, and it would, I thought I'd be a 10-year player at the Knights, but it ended up being the best thing. It was hard, but it ended up paying off dividends in the end. And to be fair, I probably jumped a little bit before I was pushed to leave, and 2007 was a rough year, performance-wise, culturally-wise, mentally, just with a whole heap of stuff going on with the club. But to eventually move and make that leap to go somewhere else and expand those horizons, it was really, I think, probably the making for me post-footy.
Yep.
Really, is that there's a big bad world out there, and it's not bad. I mean, more a big wide world out there full of opportunities, and to go and explore them. So yeah, moved down to Penrith for 2008, 2009, 2010. I had signed 3 years, lasted 2, but it was fantastic. It was a great club. Honestly, we had the best time down there. There was a bunch of guys down there that were either had girlfriends or recently married, but no kids.
Yeah.
And so we enjoyed our time at training and had a crack on the field. We weren't very successful, but we certainly had a crack off the field, which probably was to the detriment of my career there at that stage. But yeah, it was a wonderful time.
Yeah. Now, this is a question completely off the cuff. When you were at the Penrith Panthers, did you ever run into John Farragher?
Yes.
John Farragher.
Yes.
So he is a Gilgandra boy. Yeah, and also one of my relations. Just John Farragher. How big of an importance is he at the Penrith Panthers, and how big of a person is he?
Yeah, well, those type of people that come through and are connected to the club like that, is so important to the fabric. So not that I had a great, connection and relationship, but you do see these people in the corner or at functions, and it's those type of people that actually should be so proud of what their success has been now, because there's a whole heap of hard yards that have gone on. And it's a name that everyone sort of knows as well. It's very distinctive, if you didn't have a great relationship, which I probably didn't, but certainly know the name, and yeah, it's pretty cool.
And I imagine at the Panthers, was there a few other country boys amongst in the ranks there, or they mostly from
they had an even spread. Western Sydney definitely had the Pulatua brothers and Frankie Pritchard, Trent Waterhouse, Luke Lewis. They're all
some fair names.
Fair names that come through the ranks there out in Western Sydney. And then they started to bring in Petro, Seven Server, come in for 4 years. Paul Ayton from Queensland, who's a hooker that ended up going to England and playing in Cronulla as well. It just probably wasn't the right mix. Great names, but it just wasn't sort of the mix that they were looking for and for success.
And then you headed down to Melbourne, which is now your home. What's that like when someone like Melbourne is saying we want you, when they're at the time they're one of the best clubs in the competition?
Actually, so I signed for 3 years.
Yeah.
I lasted 2. Yeah. So in 2010, I ended up going backpacking for a year.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So 2010, Penrith were, and I weren't sort of on an even keel, and injuries and form and things like that. And a couple of my mates were travelling overseas, and I was extremely jealous of what they were doing. And I just had this urge that, I wasn't sort of performing. I'm not going to chew up space in the cap. I'm going to pull the pin. And there was one game I was playing against the Warriors out the back of Penrith Park, and I was warming up, playing first grade. And I was like, this is the last place I actually want to be.
Yeah, wow.
Warming up to play first grade. And I'd never had that before. And I just knew that was it. Why would you want to be out here warming up and be somewhere else? So something, there was that motivation to go do something else. And anyway, we negotiated and we parted ways. So 2010, my wife and I, Beck, we went out and, traveled the world for the next 12 months, which was just fantastic. Went through South America and USA and over to Europe. And I was on the road and ran into former Knights player and Melbourne Storm player Clint Newton, who was playing at Hull KR. and we stayed with Nudo, and at the same time, the Storm were going through their salary cap drama, and they'd had to shed like, I don't know, $3.5 million worth of talent to get under the cap, and they had to bring in talent, or maybe lack of a better word, like some journeymen or older guys that were going to be a lot cheaper than $3.5 million to get underneath the cap. So Nuno was like, well, this is going on. Like, and are you interested? Like, should get Bellyache to give you a call. And I'm like, like I wanted to play.
So you were like,
I started
starting to get back in the back of your head. You're like, I feel like going back and playing.
Yeah, it was. But I was enjoying traveling, and like, would they want me? I've been away for nearly, 8 months. Anyway, I'm driving down the car in the car down in France. Yeah. And the phone calls, and it's Bellyache.
What?
And I'm like, what the hell? This is real now. Like, he's calling. So, mate, I've got to pull over. So I pulled over, and he said, what are you doing? I was like, well, I'm in France. Like, I'm in Europe traveling. And he goes, yeah, but what are you doing? I was like, well, nothing. And you go, do you want to come and play for me? So, and that was it. Signed a contract. They faxed it over to Paris.
Got a fax.
Signed it off, and then faxed it back to Frank Panisi, and then... Yeah, mate. Reported for duty in October later that year.
So you got officially signed via the Melbourne Storm in France.
Yeah, in France. Yeah, in Paris, but via a fax.
I don't think anyone else could say
No one would know what a fax is.
No. Wow. So you come back. So you got that urge to go again.
Play. Yep.
And what's that like when you go down to Melbourne? What kind of everyone talks about the culture down there and what they do. What was it like going down there at that time in the club's history where they were like they've got in trouble for the salary cap and there's a lot of eyes on them.
Yeah.
What's that like down there at that time?
Well, to be fair, like it was only 2002 when I was at the Knights, and 2006 when we come fourth in the regular season that we ever really competed for semis and potentially going to the grand final, but we never ever got there.
Yeah,
we were just never competing, and the reason why I thought Melbourne was a realistic option is that they always got the best out of people, and they're always competing. But then you marry up what was going on with the cap, like it didn't really make sense. But I just wanted to go down there and just challenge myself. And there were probably periods when I was at Newcastle, and definitely when I was at the Panthers, that I'd had too much of a good time off the field. So this was like last chance. So I was really, really committed. Like I probably have never been before, or probably not since, but definitely up until that stage, like just fully committed to this cause. And to go down there and the renowned sort of training program that they held with Bellyache and Alex Corvo, the S&C, it was intimidating. Like the first 2 weeks, I was on the tools, so we were concreting.
Yep.
And training full time. And Bellyache said, he loves it. Like, this is again back to the point, like, this is what you've got as an opportunity as a footy player. You don't want to be troweling and on screeding with the concrete. Put everything into your time as a footy player. So even though I was 30 at that stage, like I was on the tools and I was doing the concrete, and I'm like, what is going on here? Trying to battle and get to training in the afternoon and learn everything. It was like really, really mentally and physically demanding, but it was just an awesome environment. So there was a whole heap of guys that come in from all over the place. Troy Thompson was old front rower from Raiders. Jamin Lowe, old front rower from South and Cowboys. He was working in the pub, and he got a phone call. Dead set working in a pub up in North Queensland. Bellyache calls him, come down. Bo Champion, a centre at South. Maurice Blair, a centre, 5'8" at Penrith. All these guys that were, on the periphery of going another way. Bellyache brought him back in, and mate, it was one of the most challenging, awesome experiences the pre-season, and then playing for him and those guys that were there like Slater and Cronk and Smith. That year was just fantastic. We had some young kids coming through as well, which helped. Jesse Bromwich, Gareth Widdop, Kevy Proctor, so Matt Duffy. So they had these kids coming up, had these established stars, and then just sort of chucked in all these old guys, ones on the scrap heap, and somehow it worked.
Yeah. Like
somehow it worked. We played awesome that year. We played a no-frill style of footy. Chuck in a Slater, a Cronk, a Smith, like a sort of bit of polish. But we got the minor premiership in 2011 from people saying bottom 8, if not bottom 4, to no chance of being top 8 to getting the JJ Gilton and Shields.
Yeah.
As minor premiers was pretty amazing. Unfortunately, we didn't get to the GF, but the boys won it the year after in 2012.
Would you say that's probably the most rewarding season of your career when you can, you thought that you might not even come back, you're backpacking, you come back and then you're minor premiers and you're seeing success in your career and you're playing alongside some pretty big names as well.
No, I like at the Knights, it was all I ever wanted to do was play for the Knights. Like really, bleed red and blue. But I wondered what it would have been like if I'd started my career at the Storm. And what could have transpired, and we'll never ever know. And you choose your own adventure, and that's what happens. But just being part of a system, your role, like you do your role. You don't need to do other things that leave that up to you. You just complete and do what you need to do. Everything else will look after itself. And I was really comfortable doing that as well. It's great, just being part of a cog in the wheel or the machine, and they're so successful. And have been for so long. Rugby league's a pretty simple game. So it's hard, but it's effectively pretty simple. So
would you say, like, I assume there's probably a lot of other local juniors or just local kids out in the bush who are just like, they've probably got their one team they want to play for, but then their team might not be going the best off the field or culturally wise. Is there, like, would you say to those boys, or now even girls now, just like take that punt, like you're from the bush, but maybe head to somewhere out of your comfort zone rather than maybe somewhere a bit smaller and easier?
Oh, not necessarily. Like I think if you've got a passion to go and follow a team and try and break into their junior reps and then try and break first grade, go for it. Like I wouldn't necessarily go the easier path. But then again, like if your ultimate goal is to play first grade, sometimes you've got to make some of those decisions and try and look for those little windows of opportunity. And I wouldn't say there's any easy sort of teams to break into. Like there's a lot of talented kids out there that are playing our game or rugby league, and then to progress into first grade, like it's going to be a hard road no matter how you go about it, what path you go.
Now your time in Melbourne, you're now living in Melbourne. What was that like in Melbourne? Was that the start of like your post-footy career where you're like, okay, now I've got to work out what I'm going to do? Like what was that like?
Oh, it was interesting. So I was like one of those guys that just did not think about anything else after footy.
Yeah.
So when my time finished, I was only 1 year at the Storm. And so packed up our bags and cleaned up the house and brought one of the boys back with us, one of my first boy, and we moved back to Newey. And I got a job in the pits up at Bulga.
Yep.
And playing for Lakes United, and they were investing a lot of time and energy and jobs and stuff into Lakes and work up together in the pits, and it's a well-trodden path, and to go in the mines. I'm not educated in the sense of formal qualifications at university or what have you. So, it was I worked in the mines for 3 or 4 years. I eventually got out of it, but because I thought I could contribute back to sport in some way.
Yeah.
But going down the pit and working with 12 other guys that are from various backgrounds, age demographics, levels of experience in that environment underground, like is really, really, like not many people do it. I know in the Hunter they do, but you rely on each other, the buddy next to you, get out of the pit safe, and that's pretty cool.
Yeah. When was the moment you worked there 4 years? When was the moment, or what was it that ticked where you're like, all right, I think I've had enough of this?
Well, there was a piece of like a near miss, really, underground. Not near miss that it was reportable to management, but it was a near enough miss
to scare
the bejesus out of me. And for my offside, had been in the pits for a long time to say, well, that's a top 3 for me, near miss. And I was like, well, that's number 1 for me.
Yeah.
And I've got kids, I had 2 boys now at that stage that, probably might think about something else. So yeah, just started a bit of a journey, volunteering with the New South Wales Rugby League, Country Rugby League, chatting to Smiles at the Knights, and some doing stuff with the NRL to upskill myself, mental health first aid certificates, and then just pure by accident or chance, a role come up in Queensland with the Queensland Academy of Sport, working wellbeing and community engagement. Now, like, working in Olympic, Paralympic sports was never on the radar. I really wanted to work in rugby league. Desperate to be an administrator in rugby league. And I'd been going for jobs and I was missing out, and I was really sort of getting frustrated by this because I could see a lot of my contemporaries that had jobs in footy, and I just wanted it. Like, I just wanted to be engaged in footy. When this job came up, it was just like one of those sliding door moments where I got an entry-level role at the Queensland Academy of Sport, and I was off.
Yeah. Like, you look at it now and you think to yourself, like, well, what I see is someone who's just got a good work ethic, and you'll keep fighting until you get to where you are. Like, is that what it feels like? Because it seems like when you're at the Knights, when you first got here, you're working all these jobs to try and make sure you got by, and then you want to challenge yourself and do something in sport administration. It seemed like you made sure you did everything you possibly could to eventually get there one day.
I guess so. And when you frame it up a little bit like that, you know, I maybe, you know, over-excelled or overachieved in footy. I don't know. Like, maybe there were certainly people that told me along the journey that you wouldn't play first grade. Why would you want to do that? That's not a career. That's not an industry. And missing out on teams along the journey. Like, I really wanted to prove people wrong. You can't do that. You're not good enough to play first grade, Australian schoolboys, whatever it happened to be. Go to the mines. You're not, you know, you got to do your time underground before you become a miner driver. Well, no, I want to do it. Yeah. Like, I'm motivated and I want to prove people wrong that I can do these things. And I guess, I take great pride in doing that and choosing my own adventure. Like, I just like... You know, we went backpacking for 12 months. Like, that's what I wanted to do. That's what my wife wanted to do. And together we just went and did it. So I like doing what makes you happy. And at the moment, sports administration is just, you know, I really think that those experiences that you just outlined and a couple of others that I just mentioned, footy was great. It's all I wanted to do as a kid. You know, dead set wanted to play for the Knights. And I just think it was probably a stepping stone. Yeah. Like, I was fortunate enough to play as long as I did, but it was really just a stepping stone into another career, which is sports administration, which for me is pretty cool. I would never have thought about it. I didn't even know these jobs existed when I was a kid. So, you know, working in the industry now, it's pretty cool. And it's outside a league, which, you know, that is challenging in itself to change perceptions that, you know, you're a guy from footy. What do you know about XYZ sport? And, you know, just you know, listen, learn, connect with people, have really good intentions, and, you know, try and help people along their journey. I think it's not, I personally don't think it's rocket science. There are degrees out there to go and do this to learn how to get into a career, but from my perspective, I just think it's some really good upbringing and schooling as a kid from mum and dad, my brother, that, you know, helped sort of get me to what I'm doing now.
And so you're at the Queensland Academy of Sport, and you're doing that. And then, so what was the step after that? Is that where you are now, the ice hockey?
Yeah, no. So 4 years up at QAS, Queensland Academy of Sport, and my wife got a job in Melbourne, and because we'd lived there previously, she works in tech, and we're like, let's get back to Melbourne. Let's get back down there. We just left. And basically, I'm driving down the Pacific Highway into the Hume, and I get a phone call from the AIS saying, we've got a job. It's a blue sky role. It's newly created, and we want you to fill it. And I'm like, oh my God, now we're talking. Like, this is a nice little pat on the back or recognition. And so I was really humbled by that as well, to get a call from AIS, because that's like a national role and a really well regarded organisation. So that was great. Kept on driving down to Melbourne and started at the AIS, and headed up an area called community engagement, getting athletes engaged in the community, sports, understanding the benefits of it, how it can contribute to high performance and their outcomes. And I love that because I did this here with Kirk Reynoldson when we played at the Knights. Hospitals up to John Hunter. We just go through, knock on the doors and the wards, and it's pretty cool for us to do that as athletes.
Yeah.
And I wanted other guys outside of, in Olympic, Paralympic sports to sort of have that opportunity as well. Progressed and sort of went into a wellbeing community engagement role, and through Tokyo and COVID and pandemic, and that was pretty cool. But ultimately, working across all those different sports, all your Olympic, Paralympic sports, like there's 30 plus of them that the AIS funds. I really wanted to get back into working with just one sport.
Yep.
And having sort of overseeing all the operations, and that's where the ice hockey role sort of eventuated.
Wow. So just during your time at the AIS and stuff like that, was it you see some, I assume you see some kids from the bush and from regional areas who are coming in. What's it like working with them and helping them on their journey?
Well, you obviously see a little bit in yourself there when they're so passionate and determined to do and achieve their goals, probably blindly at times, like they're, just head down, bum up, so to speak, and they're just chasing those dreams, which is great. And you really, as an athlete coming through, got to understand or work on who you surround yourself with. And I guess from my perspective, I was just trying to build those relationships, and they've got some big dreams, and it's a long journey to get to the Olympics, Paralympics. Like, it's a 4-year dream. Well, it's a lifetime dream, but between major events, it's 4 years.
A lot of work.
So there's a lot of work, a lot of support that's required. And look, to be honest, I thought playing rugby league was tough, but when you're swimming and got your head in a vat of chlorine for 8 hours a day, and staring at that black line, or your other individual sports where you're challenging yourself on the bike, on the road, around the velodrome, that's tough. And you don't have anyone else to rely on you, no other teammates to bring you up when you're down. Like, those individual athletes, they're special.
Yeah. And so now Ice Hockey Australia, it still blows me away. So the North Stars have basically got you thought, oh yeah, ice hockey, I'm into that. Have you now that you're in the role, have you got on the ice and had a go yourself?
Once. So I'm down in Melbourne, O'Brien Ice House. I thought, geez, I've actually got to get on the ice so I can at least sort of say that I've done it. Yeah. I was like an oversized Bambi. It was horrible. I didn't fall over, but I was hanging onto that side rail pretty tightly. But no, it's cool. It's 1908 ice hockey commenced in Australia.
Yeah.
1908. So that is the same time as rugby league started in Australia. So it's been around for a long time. It's a northern hemisphere sport, but it's played around the world. Mm-hmm. Obviously, the NHL, National Hockey League over in America, is big business. 30 plus teams. It runs. It's probably third or fourth behind NFL, basketball, baseball in America, but it's a big time sport. It's huge. In Canada, it's a religion. Yeah. It's everyone's playing hockey in Canada. So for me, it's not it's a huge sport here, but it's we've got 6,000 members, playing members.
Yeah.
We have 5 national teams that go to International Ice Hockey Federation World Championships every year. So men's and women's opens, 20s men's, 18s men's and women's. So 5 that go overseas, which no one really knows about. Yeah. And we've got national local championships. We've got development camps, and that's why I'm in Newcastle at the moment. There's a really passionate community of ice hockey people out there. A lot of Canadians, Americans, Russians, Scandinavians, but we're really, pretty optimistic of what's ahead for ice hockey.
Yeah, I suppose you've got to look at Newcastle, a regional centre, and they've got arguably one of the best ice hockey teams in the country, don't they? Yeah,
it's pretty crazy, really. At the end of the day, even we're in this development camp at the moment. We brought over some guys from USA Hockey, and they just can't believe how tough our guys are. The weather that we have, and then you've got this ice rink just plonked in the middle of one of the most beautiful cities in the world here in Newcastle, but around the country, we've only got 20. and they're in some cracking spots. Brisbane, Sydney, Erina. We've got some down in Canberra, Melbourne, Adelaide, Perth, but no one really thinks of ice hockey down under. Yeah. And it's really blown away our American colleagues from USA Hockey. And yeah, we punch above our weight.
Do you hope to see like the national competition grow and then get more of a following, and then who knows, we might? Is there many Australians like going over to America to play ice hockey? Like, is that like the goal, like to see them achieve their goals?
Oh, absolutely. Just on the National Australian Ice Hockey League, like it is growing. So they've added Erina, the Erina Rhinos down there, and they've got the Brisbane team. So they're two new teams that are coming to the competition. So it is growing, which is fantastic. The godfather of the Australian Ice Hockey League, or one of them, Gary Doré, out here at North Stars, he's done a tremendous amount of work, and to add those teams is it's trending in the right direction. So we'd like to look at opportunities to, continue to support the competition, and we're bringing imports over, which is fantastic. And any NHL players that are on the end of their careers that want to come and enjoy this spectacular weather, please reach out. But of course, like, guys can see the opportunities in the NHL, in the other leagues around the world. It's big business in the La Liga in Finland, and up there in Sweden, Denmark. Like, they're super strong competitions. But the big one, of course, is NHL. So we've got Nathan Walker, who's he's born in the UK actually, but he's an Australian. He moved out here when he was a couple of years old, and he's playing in the NHL. And now he's our poster boy. Yeah. And he loves the fact that he's from Australia. Yeah. And he's doing a cracking job. He's just most recently been at St. Louis, and he's just, everyone wants to follow Nathan Walker, and I reckon it's groundbreaking.
Well, you've only got to see like the likes of the Australian basketballers who go over to the NBA. They become like, people look at them and go, well, I can do that now too.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think locally the NBL have done a really good job, bringing those guys over for a season and getting them playing against men and then getting drafted in the NBA. So there's a pretty good model there that we can look at. But yeah, you're right. Like, it's unique. Like, the NHL don't really need any more players. They've got enough over there from those Northern Hemisphere countries. But when there's an Aussie over there, or the one Aussie, it stands out, and he's doing a fantastic job.
All right. So what's the goal now? Like, you keep on achieving all these things. What do you hope? What legacy do you hope to leave behind to people who are from regional areas? That's probably the biggest question. Like, what's something you hope that you can inspire the next generation of people from Taree to not only maybe achieve their rugby league goals, but do anything in life?
Well, I guess from my perspective, really enjoy your childhood. Like, it is the best time of your life, and you don't need to grow up too quickly. If you are, still at high school, or you just finished and you're considering moving away, don't rush things. Like, it, I've just turned 40 and I still don't know what I want to do when I grow up. Like, I really don't. What am I going to do in 10 years' time? Who knows? We've got the Olympics up the road in Brizzy. Yeah. There's so many other opportunities outside of sport. Don't rush life. Like, take it all in like it's special. And it's probably more evident now that I'm a father to two boys that, I don't want them to grow up anytime quick. It's really special. So those opportunities can also come to you from the bush, the country, in your hometown. And I guess the underpinning piece to it all is, be really happy in your own skin and be passionate. If you're going to do something, be passionate about it. Don't, sometimes that's unavoidable. I get it. I scrubbed moss off the floor of a, black tarp in a greenhouse, and look, it wasn't what I wanted to do, but it was a stepping stone, and sometimes you've got to do that. Absolutely. But try and identify something that you're passionate about and give it everything you got.
Well said. Thank you for that.
Too easy. Thanks very much for your time. Ciao.
Thank you.